if your teammates coming in, they'll come in, we'll fill them in. We are blessed to have Miss Olivia Perez with us today. Anytime I have any question, I know I can call, and she is just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to not only our emergent bilinguals, but just every skill we do with them is good for kids in general. Like, it's not going to be bad information, even if you say, I don't teach an ESL class, I don't teach whatever that may be. It's good for all kids. So she's got a wealth of knowledge. We are even going to record this, so if you're like, hey, I want to go back in here or know a little bit more about that, we'll have this available to you to watch later if you want to go back through it. So I'm going to turn it over, and I am just going to absorb the greatness you have brought for us. No pressure.
I'm not sure who she was introducing. Also, I just started sweating with the camera. My name is Olivia Perez, and I work in the Bilingual ESL department and all of program compliance. So program compliance is TELPAS, LPAC, testing students when they come into the district, ESL certification. So I do program compliance K-12, but curriculum instruction 6 through 12. So all the secondary. So I'm going to go over some general things. Please know that you can always contact our office and we can come back in, and we are happy to sit with you in dialogue about situations in your classroom, about best practices for a certain student. We can come in and do individual PDs just with you alone or with your team. So we're always happy to come back out, because today will just be a couple of general things, and I'll tell you a couple of resources available to you. You may have heard her mention emergent bilingual. So emergent bilingual is the new term. So instead of LEP student or EL English learner, you'll start hearing emergent bilingual, which for some people can be a little confusing because it might sound like a bilingual program, but it's just they're emerging as bilinguals because they're picking up English and adding it to their first language. So you'll begin hearing that a little. So for this session, we'll understand language acquisition and learn a new strategy. And our language target is discuss language acquisition and read about the strategy, right? So the most productive language learning classroom is one where the teacher increases comprehensibility of information, increases interaction, and decreases student anxiety. So really quickly, turn and talk to someone. How do we do this in our classroom? How do you do some of those things in your classroom? Increasing comprehensibility, interaction, and decreasing student anxiety. Okay, go ahead and wrap up your last thought. So as you started talking through things, I saw people start to pick up momentum and start to mention more and more things. Because as teachers, we do so many of these things innately. We just haven't labeled them as language acquisition strategies. But when we realize, oh my gosh, what I have been doing is actually a strategy for language acquisition, we're more likely to continue it and conscientiously embed it into our teaching. Because increasing comprehensibility, that just means breaking it down to where they can understand. And I heard somebody over on this side mention having different ways of presenting the information, not just always lecture, having different ways of them reading. And so also increasing interaction. We are social human beings, and as such, we have to be able to interact. And sometimes we'll hear well, inevitably, if I let them work in groups, they get off task. So do teachers, so it's fine. But we do need that time. And allowing that interaction will help them build up some of their social language as well, so we definitely want to always do that. So now that you know a lot of the things you've been doing in your classroom are also strategies, you're more likely to continue doing that. And as I mentioned, most of the strategies that we talk about are also applicable not only to all students, but our students of poverty. Because our students of poverty come to us language poor, and as such are still language learners. So definitely ensuring that we are encompassing all of our students. So a few things we want to talk about. So I mentioned emergent bilingual, so you may hear EB or emergent bilingual more often. You will still see LEP when it has to do with PEMS coding, with funding. You might still see that occasionally, and that's limited English proficient. But we try not to use that when we are specifically talking about a student because it focuses on their deficiency, and we want to focus on their strengths. Like, I struggle with math, but I really don't want people to like label me like limited math proficient. Like, I can do other things. So we want to focus on their strengths as a learner anytime we can. TELPAS is our Texas English Language Proficiency Assessment System. This is a federal mandate that we assess all of our emergent bilinguals every year in this early spring to make sure that they are making 1 year's progress in language. So they're labeled and they're assessed in speaking, writing, reading, and listening. And they're expected to make 1 year's growth every year. So they may be beginner in speaking, and they might be intermediate in writing. They're just expected to make 1 year's growth. And TELPAS is important because it applies to how they rate our schools. So this year, our district barely made the cut. The entire district has to have 36% of their EBs make that yearly progress, and we were like at 36%. So our district made it this year. I will say that most of what our students struggle with the most is speaking. And most of the students that are having trouble getting past intermediate are not your newcomers. They're your students who have been here 5 years plus. So they're the students that have come up to you from elementary and kind of get stuck in the middle. The last one is affective filter. So affective filter, I want you to consider that when you are comfortable somewhere, there is an imaginary little filter. Let's say that it's at shoulder level when you're comfortable, right? And so it goes up if you have anxiety or stress of any kind. So I was leaving my office to come over here, and I stepped outside and it started raining, okay? What you don't understand is the mane that is around here, if it gets wet or is exposed to the elements, it gets larger and larger as time goes. So I got into my car, and I was I got in and then I dragged the cart in. Like most people would be like, let me put the cart in. No, this was the most important thing that had to get out of the rain. So so I pulled up here and I was like, it's not even raining here. Like, it's not even raining. So I get off and I attempted to control and maintain and squash down as much as I could. But that's affective filter. So studies show if the student's affective filter is high, no learning will take place. None. It doesn't matter how great your math manipulatives are, your Pinterest board, none of that matters. If the student's affective filter is high, no learning will take place. So if I had been a student arriving on your campus, it would have been difficult for me to learn at this point because my affective filter had gone from anxiety to my hair, right? And so my affective filter was high. It has nothing to do with your class or your content. It's the student's perception. Not I'm a great teacher, they should be really comfortable here. It's the student's perception. So really quickly, talk to the person next to you. How can we help lower the affective filter to help get them ready for class?
My kids play it a lot so that they also talk about everybody has
Is this labeled as
I don't know about teams. I'll show you where though. I don't know because I don't have the same view. Let me find out. Okay, wrap up that thought. In the interest of time, I have to wrap this up quickly sometimes because she told me I only have until 5:15, so I'm going to go really quick. I'm kidding. So again, affective filter is one of those things that if we're aware of it, we can't, any of the strategies we use are not going to be effective until we're aware of affective filter and how students learn. And students acquire language through speaking, writing, reading, and listening. So they acquire language through all four interconnected. All four of those language skills have to be used simultaneously, all built in order for students to learn language. Okay, this is just a breakdown of how we're quickly going to run through a few things. Language target. In the interest of time, I'm just going to do this out loud. What is the purpose of a language target? Has anyone ever seen one, and why are they important for our second language learners? Anyone? Yes.
I've used language targets before. It's like a learning objective for content, but it's for language instead. So it's like I can define this orally by the end, or I can write, this by the end.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to go back to our beginning where I labeled it. So I put discuss language acquisition with a partner. Your learning target is the what you want them to learn. Your language target is the how they're going to get there. That's the vehicle they're going to use to arrive there. So for example, Pythagorean theorem. They're going to write their understanding of Pythagorean theorem in their journal. See how they mentioned right there? It is very specific. You use language terms, discuss, write, and then you say what you want them to do and then how. Like here with the partner. If I had been vague and just said hey, they're going to talk about language acquisition, well, that more than likely that's not going to happen because I wasn't specific enough. So I did it conscientiously, intentionally embed it in there. When you intentionally embed language into your class, you're more likely to do it. They're going to discuss language acquisition with a partner. So I was very specific as to who. Language targets are not meant to give you something else to do. They're meant to drive the work. Because if we want them to learn, they learn with and through language. So they're going to learn language through content and content through language. And so language targets are intentionally infusing your lessons with language. Okay. Da-da. Okay. We're not looking at data, we're just talking about it. You have so much data available to it, and just understanding how it will inform. Also, and I'm going to briefly jump into elevation to give you a look at it in case you haven't seen it yet. But to understand also that none of these are assessing the student's speaking. So that's something that you have to conscientiously be assessing, formally or informally, within your classroom. Because you have access to the student's previous year's information. And so you can monitor, like, they were a beginner in speaking last year, how am I going to help pull them up to an intermediate? And I'm not sure if you have gone into elevation yet. I apologize for all my tabs there. Okay, on the CFB page here, you will see at the bottom, elevation. Elevation is an online software that we have available to every staff member that has all the information about your ELs, right? Log in, it's just your CFB log in. If for some reason you don't have an account, you can email us and we'll send you out the invite again to create your account. Your dashboard will look a little bit different than mine because I have the district-wide dashboard. You can also create your own dashboard. Like if when you open it, you want to see which of your students are beginners, it's going to pull that up for you. See, mine has like how many are exited. I have the entire district. So for example, and you can't break it, so go in and play around. If we wanted to see the student list at Bush, and I only wanted what status current EBs, because once they meet the criteria to exit the program, we still monitor them for 4 years. So if we don't want to look at the monitors because they've exited the program, you see this number, how it changed. See how that you have 210, but when we hit current EBs, you're down to 110. So the others are monitored, they've exited the program. Here is where you start looking to identify concerns. That 6+ is they've been in our school system their entire schooling and haven't exited the program. Once you go into any of these students, you can hit student right there, get all their information, their first language, their grade, the date they entered U.S. schools, right there, look at that, 2021. Here are the TELPAS scores. So this writing and reading are still at a 1 at a beginning level. So that would be our biggest concern, is trying to help pull that up. You can also come down here. So you have a lot of information available to you. You can see their schedule here, test results, if they have MAP scores, STAR scores, all of this is available here. You would also be able to see instructional accommodations that may have been used by previous teachers. You'd be able to see if they were receiving any other special services. So all of the information is available here. And you can pull up, I pulled up the entire school, but you could have pulled up just your class. So you have access to all of that information. Questions about elevation?
There's one over here.
Yes.
So I'm not going to see the whole school, but I would love to see only my students. Do I email you or?
Try to get in first, because you may only have access to your students.
I have access to the whole school.
Probably what's your role in the school?
Teacher.
Okay, so you go here, put and. So underneath the school, put and then like teacher name, and then put in your name, and you'll see just your students. It lets you really filter down. It also lets you chart it and pull it out as an Excel document that you can then move around as needed. Other questions? Okay, so swirl ties back into our language target. This is just our speaking, writing, reading, listening, right? So understanding that they're all interconnected, students must have daily practice. It must be planned, structured, and interactive. Daily practice, because your English, your emergent bilinguals are not going to go home and do a turn and talk at the dinner table in English that night. Like, they're not going to be writing in their journal in English at home. If you don't build the time in your classroom for them to practice, there won't be any other time for them to practice. They will only practice correct English in your classroom. So that's why it's very important that it's planned and structured and that we offer daily practice. Not all lessons lend themselves to all aspects of swirl. You may have some lessons that are heavy on writing. Understanding that, looking at your entire week, and knowing that next week I need to really be speaking because it didn't. So just understanding those pieces. Okay, so a few things that you can do, understanding that swirl is interconnected. Having sentence starters for students, sometimes they're so busy trying to figure out how to start the sentence, that they can't answer it. Like it takes them longer to do that. So taking some of that pressure off of them and having sentence starters. So maybe the sentence starter is the three causes of the Revolutionary War are, and you've given them that sentence starter. That also gives them a sentence starter that they can now take into other content areas. So offering and having those posted and around, having them write them down in their journal so that they have sentence starters, and changing the sentence starters around so that they see the different types of ways to write sentences. So then you can have the blank at the beginning, and at the end it can say, are some of the reasons that caused the war. So changing the way that the sentences are written, but ensuring that they have access to those. Cutting out the white noise is like, sometimes we'll give a student something that has so much print on it, even if it's just a worksheet, if it's a book, but knowing that you can just mark some of that out, because when it's too much print, they can't get to what you actually want them to do. So here, I could absolutely take off this title off the top. I could just Sharpie through it, because that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that this is just a guide. So just Sharpieing through things, marking things out, but that takes some of that white noise off for them so that they can focus in on what is the most important. So understanding how we can kind of go in through there. Rephrasing things for students, because sometimes some of the words that they're familiar with are not present in like everyday conversation. So rephrasing often. Repeating things for them, reading together, and then also modeling. So a student comes up and says, Ham has a worksheet that I don't have. I'll tell you what's not effective is saying like, that's incorrect pronoun usage, so we're gonna start over. We don't know how to use pronouns. I mean, grammar doesn't work that way. So modeling for the student. Oh, he has a worksheet that you don't have. Let me get that from you. You're modeling. So that's going to be the most effective within conversations like this. So the last one there is understanding the linguistic accommodations available on STAR. Students on STAR, if it has been done in the classroom during the LPAC, they can have these linguistic accommodations on their STAR. They are translator dictionary. The rephrasing, they can do a rephrase and a read aloud. If it has not been done in the classroom, legally your LPAC representative cannot check off for it to be an accommodation. It will also be more confusing to them because they're not aware of how to use that or whether it's okay to use it if they're not used to it. So I recommend using those in class because you can use all the instructional accommodations that you would like in class. You don't have to put it on to their STAR. If you have a student that might pass that STAR, you don't want to put the linguistic accommodations because then they will not be eligible to exit the program because they only passed it with the accommodations. So if you have a student that might pass it, you don't want to offer the accommodations. We have translator dictionaries in our office that we keep on hand. You have to request them. Like I'm not going to automatically know that you need a Pashto dictionary. So you request it, we send it to you. You have to teach a student how to use that translator dictionary because kids no longer know how to use those things. Those are not used at all. But showing the student how to use it, keeping it in your room, knowing that they have access to it, but you can request those from our office. If it's not a very well-known language, sometimes we have to order it, but we try to keep at least a few on hand at all times. So that's one of those if you need from our department. We also have some of these flip books, and these have the ELPs on them. The ELPs tie into like your language target. They're the English Language Proficiency Standards. Just like your TEKS for your content, the proficiency standards are for language. So it's a little flip book, flip, and based on the language skill and the student's level, it opens up and gives you strategies. So if they're at a beginning, I'm listening, it gives you the accommodations, And then it has strategies built in. And dun, dun, dun. So we have these type of things available. We also have this type available that also has the ELPs, that has a handy dandy page for you to list your students where they are. So I might put listening, these are the students who are at beginning level. You list them if they're at intermediate. So you kind of plot out your students and where they are on their tell paths. The last thing we have that isn't as applicable, it's not the last thing, but the last thing that I brought with me today. It's not as applicable on this campus because you don't have as many Spanish speakers. But we have Spanish to English cognate books available that you can keep in your classroom for students to look up. Cognates are words that look the same, sound the same, mean the same in English and Spanish. But we do have these available if you need. Again, it's not as applicable here at your campus.
I also have some in my
Yes.
classroom, so if you need any of those books, come into my classroom. I have a bunch of stacked.
Yeah, the ESL teacher will kind of give them lots of resources so that when teachers go to them, they'll have some of those resources available for them. Questions on any of these? Perfect. Okay, like I said, we can come in to work through your PDs. That bilingual ESL reimbursement is if you are a new teacher to CFB and you have either come to us with your ESL certification, new this year, or if you get it by the end of October, you will receive a $350 one-time bonus. If you're a current CFB teacher and you acquire your either bilingual or ESL certification by October, you're also eligible for that one-time bonus. We are offering many ESL prep sessions. We're offering the bilingual prep sessions as well. So we are wanting to help you get these certifications.
So nothing for us that already have it.
No, we're happy to have you.
Thank you.
No, unfortunately, not.
Nope, I'm still on the backpack.
I heard a lot of people asking for those backpacks. Yeah. Okay, so we are able to come out and support in any way that you need us to. Resources that you might need. That is our information. Esperanza Hills is our secondary specialist. And so you can email either one of us, and we're both happy to come out.
So if you ever get to that point and you have a kiddo that's in your class and you just, maybe you're like me and I had it in my class and I was like, I feel like I'm hitting a wall. Like I pulled every tool out of the toolbox and I still see they're not connecting with my class. It doesn't feel like they're learning. And I just don't know what my next steps are. That's when it's a great time to brainstorm. And they'll call on the phone and brainstorm with you. They can come out and brainstorm with you. They can model for you. I've seen them do it before, and it has built my toolbox up. So any way that you need support, she says not as applicable here. Well, we're a quarter here of students who are Hispanic. So that, as well as all the other languages that we have on our campus particularly, this isn't beneficial to them. Now, maybe not necessarily like the Spanish cognate book for all of those languages. However, all of the language accommodations are good. We have kids coming from all over the world here. So if you hit a wall, you're like, oh my gosh, I just don't know how to help XYZ kiddos in my classroom, please reach out and don't let those kids just continue to struggle and you continue to go, I just don't know what more. Like, this is the more that we've got. So let's use the more we've got.
We're happy to help.